everybody. I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, along with Jenna Blum, which was started when the pandemic began and bookstores had all their doors shuttered and authors like me had their tours canceled, and readers just were desperately hungry to have connection with other readers and other authors. And we're still going strong. I think we're going on 6 years now, which is first grade. So that's really great. So thank you all for supporting us. A few housekeeping things before I introduce our fabulous guest, which is you'll see on the right, there's a column a chat. If you have any questions at all for our guest or about anything, pop them in the chat. I have put a link up so you can order our guest books, all of them. They're all wonderful. And thank you for being here. So today is really special because I love it when the author is also a friend. And we have Meg Waite Clayton with Typewriter Beach. This is just, we got it in stereo here. This is like a totally wonderful, amazing book. It's just, I can't say enough about it, but let's say enough about Meg first. So I don't actually remember when I first met Meg, but I do remember when we did an event together in Texas, East Texas, of all places. And for some reason, it was the Pulpit Queens. And for some reason, they wanted all the authors to dress up in a circus motif. So, I was a clown and I didn't think I was clowny enough. So Meg came to my rescue with an eyebrow pencil and put like these great freckles on me. So we became. So Meg has always continued to be supportive and wonderful, and she's just a fabulous author. She's a New York Times and international bestseller and book club favorite, and author of 9 novels, including the international bestsellers, The Postmistress of Paris, which was a Good Morning America Buzz book, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, a Publisher's Weekly Notable Book, and a Costco Book Club. People Magazine, Indie Next Booksellers, Low and Stars Librarian, I'm Still Going, Book of the Month, USA Today, and Amazon Editor's Pick. The Last Train to London, she's the author of that. The Wednesday Sisters, a book I absolutely love, named one of Entertainment Weekly's 25 essential best friend novels of all time. And she's the author of the #1 Amazon fiction bestseller, Beautiful Exiles. Her books have been finalists for Barbara Kingsolver's Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction, the Langham Prize, and the National Jewish Book Award. She's been published in 24 languages, and most amazingly, her screenplay for The Last Train to London was chosen for the prestigious Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman-sponsored The Writers' Lab. Meg has written more than 100 shorter pieces for the LA Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and public radio, often on the particular challenges that women face, which is partly why this book, Typewriter Beach, is so fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about the book once, and then I'll let Meg speak, I promise, and I'll shut up. This book is set in 1957 and 2018, Carmel by the Sea in Hollywood. Typewriter Beach is about a very unusual friendship between Isabella, a young actress who is yearning to be the next star in a Hitchcock production, and Leon Chazan, an Oscar-nominated screenwriter who was blacklisted. And there's even more in the book, which makes it even more interesting because Meg fast forwards 60 years later to a granddaughter who finds some secrets and some scripts, which raises serious questions. So let me tell you the praise for Meg Waite Clayton's Typewriter Ways. Irresistible, starred Publishers Weekly Review. Clayton expertly interweaves Gemma's, Isabella's, and Leon's tales as each attempt to forge their path in a cutthroat industry. Readers will be riveted. Another starred review from the Library Journal. Clayton delivers another top-tier dual timeline historical hit. Thought-provoking and timely, it's sure to be a big summer book. It's one of Washington Post's 5 works of fiction to read this summer. Top 10 library reads, Publishers Weekly Summer Read, Women's World Book Club book, pick, Zibby's books that'll make you swoon, AARP summer read, and probably like a million other things that there are more. Modern Mrs. Darcy summer read. I had to like scroll down. Alabama Booksmith signed first edition selection, Book Report Network, Reader's Top 6 Books, the Atlanta Journal Books to Look Forward to. Welcome, 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 Meg Waite Clayton and Typewriter Beach. I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Just really delighted. Carolyn, I'm going to add one more that we just got yesterday, which is the Los Angeles Times named it, one of 10 books to take with you this summer. So that's really
cool. That is great. That is great.
I would say for anybody who's out there listening, and I'm listening to that resume, remembering when I first started writing, and I think you and I met before I was even published on readerville.com.
Readerville, of course, that's right. That's right.
I was even published, and I remember the days when I had absolutely nothing on my resume, and so when I hear that, a description of me now, it's a little overwhelming and really lovely. And
it's totally lovely. It's totally wonderful. Like, don't you want to tattoo it on your forehead?
I do. Exactly. But I want everybody to know that, you just keep doing it, or you just put one word after another and you just keep doing it and you get there.
So I want to ask you, there's such an interesting origin story to what was propelling you into writing Typewriter Beach. Oh my goodness, Typewriter Beach. How did the book come about? Oh, we just lost your sound. We just lost your sound, Meg. Sound. Okay, hold on. Oh, we're back. We're back. Okay.
So this was a pandemic book. I started writing another book that my editor actually wanted to buy, which is always a lovely position to be in, It was set in Paris, and and a couple things had happened. One, the pandemic, so you couldn't get anywhere. And two, my father passed away, which was quite devastating, both devastating for me emotionally, and also the burdens of handling his estate and also attending to my mom, who was at the time dying as well, was kind of overwhelming. And so I just couldn't get words on the page. So finally, I had a little writing group that I put together for the pandemic, which is just 3 other friends, none of whom is book published, but they like to write. And I thought it would be a nice way to connect. And we met by Zoom every Friday morning, 9 o'clock my time. So I told them that we're called the Gems, Jen, Ellie, Meg, and Cheryl. I told them I was going to set aside that one that wasn't working and try something new. And I was going to try to do a novel that I've long been thinking about that emerges out of my fascination with the blacklist, the Hollywood blacklist of the 1940s and 50s and on into the 60s. And so we turned off our Zoom cameras and our Zoom microphones, and I started writing, and what came out was a Gemma point of view with Leo. Leo's already dead, and Gemma is cleaning out his cottage. And it was very much a chapter that arose out of my grief at losing my dad, and the things that I had to do in the aftermath of his death, including cleaning out his life. Putting his life away. I thought that would just be the beginning. I just thought that would be my way into the story, and I would jettison it. In the long run, I meant it to be a 1950s story about the blacklist. But then it just kept wrapping itself around that story in some ways. And I began to realize that part of the thing about both Leo and Isabella, my 2 main characters from the 1950s story, Leo is the screenwriter, the blacklisted screenwriter, and Isabella is the star whose studio means for her to be the new Grace Kelly. The thing about them is they both have secrets, and they're not telling you, and so somebody else has to figure them out and tell you. And so that's where the contemporary story, which is Jenna and Sam, and is modern Hollywood, 2018, post Me Too, and a bit of a love story as well, comes into play. And when I finally embraced that, at one point in time, I tried stripping out the whole contemporary story, and the book just fell off. It was like a souffle that deflated, and so I embraced that it was going to be dual timeline, which I don't generally like. When I'm reading dual timeline,
they're hard. Oh my God.
Historical. I don't want to read the present story. I want to read the historical. But once I embrace that it's dual timeline, it works much better. So that's so
fun. That's so funny because early on in your career, you wrote contemporary novels, correct? I mean, the Wednesday Sisters.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Wednesday Sisters was sold as a contemporary novel, but it's set in the 1960s, and I
Oh,
always thought
right.
it was
That's right.
historical.
That's right.
But
That's
you know,
right. It's
when I pitched a book after that, that novel is five friends who meet at
right.
the beginning of the women's movement, basically in Palo Alto in a park as they were
That's
involved.
right. That's right. It has
But
the elements of a historical novel. You're absolutely right.
yeah, but so when I picked the next one, I picked a historical novel, and my publisher said, "Oh, we really want another contemporary novel," and I was like, "A what?" But anyway, I have written both. I've written contemporary novels and I've written historicals. The contemporary novels always have some exploration of history as well. So
I wanted to ask you about the research because there's so much in here that's so interesting about Hitchcock and about the blacklist and about what it's like, what it was like to be a female actress back then. What in the research surprised you, both in a good way and in what were you shocked to read about?
well, the thing I was most shocked to read about, honestly, is I knew that the studio contracts that the studios had with their actors gave the studio a ton of control over the actors' lives,
Right.
actors and actresses. But I did not realize how much. I did not realize one, that there was plastic surgery around then back then, or two, that stars could be required by the studio to have plastic surgery, or their contract could be terminated. So, like, even Elizabeth Taylor, after she was famous very young, and as she matured, her nose broadened, and so her studio had her have a nose job to narrow her nose. So that kind of
They
thing.
hushed that up though, didn't they? I mean, that wouldn't be
Oh,
something.
it was like, so. The first line of this novel is the first thing they changed was
Right,
her
because I was
hair.
going to talk
Yeah,
about
her
that.
hair.
Yeah.
That was the first thing they changed, and that is because back then the only women who colored their hair were hussies. Hussies and whores. And so the stars would have, but blonde was very, in. Obviously, Marilyn Monroe was very blonde. I have one of the things I found in my research after I'd written that line actually is a shot of Grace Kelly, and it's a profile of her, and it has a little card that says Grace Kelly hair color number whatever, and it was a hair test for what color they should make her hair. And
Unbelievable. But it's still going on today though. It's still going on
right,
today. Only now people are there's something very accusatory about it where people say, what has Meg Ryan done to her face? And they'll
I know,
blow it
right?
up.
It
Or
is.
why is it? And the
Right.
thing is that there still is a lot of pressure on women to look a certain way,
There
especially
is.
on film. And while
Right.
the only difference is that there's women are sort of split down the middle where half of them say like, why are you doing that, why are you doing it, and the other half are saying like, well, maybe I can do that too, or whatever. So I want to, you mentioned how you find your way into a story and things that you strip out later, and I wrote down here about that I thought the killer opening in Typewriter Beach, that it dares the reader to look away. It says her hair, that was the first thing they changed even before they changed her name. I mean, how can you like not keep on reading that? So I'm very curious, what did you strip away as the original opening to get to this brilliant one?
Oh, well, thank you very much. I will tell you that I did not write that as the opening. That was not the opening for many versions of this novel. It
Wow.
opened when I started writing it. It opened with Gemma in Leo's cottage, and that was the opening for a long time. It was the opening until it went to my editor, and so that's draft number 10,862. But it went to my editor, and my editor said, "You should start this book with the Isabella and Hitchcock scene." In the opening chapter, Isabella goes to audition with Hitchcock. She said, "It's unlike any scene I've ever seen. It is fascinating. Hitchcock is such a fascinating character, and you should open with that." And I said, well, "I like the scene too, but I can't do that." So I guess I can't start the story that way. And so we went through a couple rounds with me refusing to move that chapter forward. And then I saw that Sarah Nelson, my editor at HarperCollins, was absolutely right, and it needed to start with that Isabella chapter, and so I moved it forward, and things started to fall. You know how it is. You know, drafting a novel is a little bit like, putting a puzzle together. And the pieces, you move them around trying to fit them in, or at least I do. And so once I moved that puzzle piece to the front of the book, things started falling into place in a way that was really productive.
It's a perfect opening. Oh, you have a question. This is great. Okay, let me show this. This is from Robin Stahl. Hi, Robin. Meg, how did you select the year 2018 for the current part of the book? It was the second book in a row that I read with that year as the setting. I bet I know the answer.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm wondering what the other book is. But the reason I did was because 2017, the end of 2017 was the beginning of when Me Too exploded as a movement. Harvey Weinstein was outed by the New York Times team, and so that was something that I wanted to explore since I had imagined the story as a story about how women in the 1950s were treated, as well as men and people who were blacklisted. But everything I write has some element of why don't we give women respect kind of stuff. So I thought, well, if I'm going to have a contemporary story, I should explore that. And so if I didn't want to put it right when Harvey Weinstein was outed, because I didn't want that to be the story. I wanted the aftermath of that. And so what I have is Gemma, who's my young screenwriter and Leo's granddaughter. She had something happen before Me Too that might have been different if it had happened after Me Too. And that's what I'm exploring there. And also the very beginning of 2018, 2017 was Me Too and this big rush of let's treat women better. And then the beginning of 2018 was both the Oscars. So a lot of this book centers on the Oscars. But it was also just the beginning of a little bit of backlash. People saying, a bunch of French women saying, oh, this has gone too far. And, even the women think it's gone too far. And so that's what I was exploring there. I'm very interested in the progress of women through the ages and the lack of progress of women through the ages. And so that's what I'm exploring now.
So, I love that. I love that you focus on women who are defying the odds, making a difference, and how that emotion and that feeling resonates within you and on your pages. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, what's sort of happening now where it seems to be going steadily backwards for women. What do you think we can do, if anything? I also know you have a legal background, which is great. So do you have hope for the future? I mean, do you think that this backlash is just because people are scared? What is it about women that scares powerful men?
Well, that is a very interesting question. I think that what scares men about powerful women is the idea that it undermines who they believe they are, their own sense of place in the world as, basically dominant men. I think for me, and part of the reason this is a subject that I've covered a lot in nonfiction, in opinion pieces for the LA Times, the Washington Post, and the San Francisco Chronicle, among others, is we get our idea of what a woman should be and what a girl should be and what we should do and how we should behave is very much shaped by film and TV, by what we see on the screen. What we see
That's right.
What we see on the screen. And so I feel, and one of the things I learned probably 15 years ago now, and really started to focus on, was the fact that the people who control movies are still predominantly male.
Yes.
The heads of studios are predominantly male. The directors are predominantly male. The writers are predominantly male. And
that's right.
What that means is we get a predominantly male view of women, broadcast to us in all these mediums. And so I sort of took it on as a mission in my nonfiction writing to just expose that. It's, name it, change it, right? If you don't know it's there, you don't know that it's something that needs to be changed. And so that is, I think that bringing more women into roles behind the scenes will make a big change in that. And honestly, that's the Writers Lab that I was part of, which was an amazing experience. I first wrote The Last Train to London as a screenplay, and it was chosen for that. And that is, Meryl Streep and Nicole Kidman's effort to get more women's voices into film, and especially older, more experienced women's voices. And so I think efforts like that will go over time a long way toward making a difference. We're starting to see a difference now. This year, the most recent piece I wrote for the LA Times on the subject, I wrote this year, and it was because for the first time ever, there were as many female protagonists as male protagonist-driven films in the top 100 films of the year.
That's great. That's great.
It's greater than it sounds, but it is a pain.
It's a start. It's a start. I wanted to ask you more about writing the script for the Writers Lab, which is this extraordinarily prestigious thing. Did you find that writing scripts changed the way you write your novels, or did you find it helped you, or was it two separate things where you can do this in a script but you wouldn't do it in a novel, or vice versa?
Yeah, it's interesting. The way I came to writing scripts, because I'm not a screenwriter, is I had this story I wanted to write, The Last Train to London. It's about the Kinder Transport, which was primarily a Jewish kid rescued from
right.
And I'm not Jewish. I didn't feel like I was the right person to write it. My agent at the time thought I was the right person to write it for a number of reasons, but it was too daunting. It was a very daunting subject to take on for me. And so I thought, oh, well, that's okay. I'll just write this as a screenplay. I'll learn to write a screenplay in the process, and I'll get it out of my system because, nothing's ever going to happen with a screenplay I write in the novel.
I love this.
And so I did. I learned how to write a screenplay on that novel, and it was chosen for the Writers Lab, which is really an honor. I got to be mentored by an Oscar-nominated screenwriter and a producer, and a bunch of other people, but they were the two who read my screenplay and spent a lot of hours talking to me about how I could make it better and that kind of thing. But it made me, there are two things. One, it's easier in a way, because when you're writing a novel, if you're going to set a scene in the Vienna train station in 1939, you have to know what that Vienna train station looks like.
Right.
Be able to do the whole scene. If you're writing a screenplay, you just put, plug line, Vienna train station or night or whatever it is, and then you just start writing your scene. And so you can focus very quickly on the action of your story. And it did totally change the way I write, because it was a very good way for me to focus on story and grab the story before I got in all the details of what the Vienna train station in 1939 looked like. And so I have done everything I've started since then, The Postmistress of Paris and this Typewriter Beach, I started as a screenplay. I love that. It may be that nothing will ever happen with any of those screenplays. I haven't looked.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just I think what you're saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the script gets the basics of what a story is.
Exactly.
And then you can always spread it out. This sort of feeds into my next question, which was, I always want to know if writers learn something from their past books that they can use in their next book. You've already said that, yeah, you did because of the script. But before you wrote the script, did you feel that, did you feel like, for example, you learned something from Wednesday Sisters that you could apply to your next novel? Or was it just a totally new project?
Oh, I think, life is about learning, right? If we're not learning, then what's the point of life? So I certainly have learned something from every one of my novels. And one of the ways I learn it is honestly through reader feedback. So I love this world where it's very easy for readers to connect with you. I love connecting with readers on Facebook. I love hearing about people by email. I just think it's a brave new world. I can't imagine the days when that wasn't so possible. But I think you learn, what works and what doesn't, and what people bump over. For example, The Wednesday Sisters is set in the 1960s, but it's got a retrospective voice, and so it's told from basically the present, not the present when I wrote it, which was in this century, right? And so I referenced at one point how people write, and because it's a book about writers, a book about.
Oh, you just lost your sound. Okay, hang on, everybody. We're going to get back. We're going to get Meg back in 2 seconds to talk about this. Are you back? No, I can't hear you. Nope. Okay, so yeah, no, I just got you.
Okay. I just unmuted my mic. I have no idea what's happening. I'm very sorry, but it did give me a little notification.
No problem.
Anyway,
no problem.
I was saying, so the Wednesday Sisters, I put this little nod to my friend Laura Gage, who I did a Poison 10 event with this last week, because she listens to the same song on constant repeat at the time on her iPod as she writes the book. That's just that one song over and over.
What song is it?
Right, so fascinating.
It's fascinating, yeah.
About how this one of the writers says if I did this my bunny slippers wouldn't be there or my iPod would break or whatever, and it bumped a lot of people because they were in the 1960s, and I got more emails than you could possibly imagine about the fact that there were no iPods in the 1960s. I was like, I do know that, and it's a retrospective voice, but it made me realize that even you have to be careful, even when you do things like that you keep the reader in the fictional spot that you have them in. So so everything I've learned something from. Absolutely.
Typewriter Beach to me really got at a lot of the angles of the question about what does it mean to be successful, to have other people think you are successful and to feel that way yourself. So I wanted to ask you, you're incredibly successful. What surprised you about success? What does success mean to you? And does it mean to you what you thought it would?
That's a very good question. I will say that one of the things that success has meant is that I have to get up in front of crowds and use microphones. And when I started this, I will tell you a funny story about when I was in the 8th grade in English class, and we had to do presentations. I will tell you that I developed early, so I was very self-conscious about my body. And I got up. I was doing a thing on witches. And there was a witch named Bridget, and I accidentally said Bridget Bardot instead of Bridget whatever. And the whole class, especially the boys in the class, they laughed. and I literally sat down and I refused to finish it. My teacher said, "I'll have to fail you if you don't get up and finish it." And I said, "You'll have to fail me." From that time, I was totally traumatized about speaking in public. And so one of the things that surprised me is how much public speaking.
Oh, you just sound. Yep, you're on again. Okay.
But it's notification. It turns out I can mute and unmute. So, wait a minute. You know what it's doing? Hold on. Disconnect. Hold on.
Okay, we can hear you. No, we can't hear you. Can't hear you. Okay.
You hear me now?
Now you are. Yeah, now you are. Yep. Now you are. Okay. So
I think I've been on a mic on my phone this whole time. I don't know why, but is the sound different?
Okay.
Now?
It does, and it sounds much clearer now.
Off my phone, and that will take care of that problem.
Okay, hang on, everybody.
Okay. So anyway, let's see, what was I saying?
So you were talking about public speaking, that you didn't realize
public speaking. So if I'd known, honestly, if you told me that if you wanted to be a successful novelist, you'd have to get up and speak publicly, I probably would have stayed practicing law. I wasn't even a litigator because I didn't like a podium and a microphone. I was a corporate lawyer because I can tell anybody, I can tell any billionaire or anybody else what to do as long as we're all seated at a table. But if I have to stand up and tell people what to do or speak to them in any way, so that's my dirty little secret. When you see me, I've gotten pretty comfortable with it. I think I look pretty comfortable when I'm up on stage.
You do. You look totally comfortable.
But I'm always a little nervous about it.
Robin says, "Yay! It sounds so much better." Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, that's an amazing question, and it's also like I thought the way you talked about success in terms of how terrible it was for writers who were blacklisted, and the only way they could get their work out was to have somebody else's name on it. Yeah. And it was just a terrifying, frightening time, and not to bring the mood down, but it's very prescient. It sounds very much like a lot of stuff that is going on today with censorship and who gets to tell a story and who doesn't get to tell a story, and it's strange. So let's move back to a fun question.
That's one of the themes of the book is who tells a story, who controls the narrative.
That's
makes
right.
a big difference in our lives.
Yes,
And
it does.
I did not imagine that this novel would be quite as relevant as it. I knew that even if women's stuff would be relevant, because sadly it always is. But I did not realize that the silencing of voices might be relevant, and that's been very interesting to watch in not necessarily the way.
There actually were two different articles today. I think one was in the New Yorker, and I forget where the other one was, about the silencing of white male authors. It said that, women writers were always laughing because they're saying, oh, yeah, right. Apparently there's a backlash now towards the year of the Jonathans, Jonathan Franzen, Jonathan. I used to always say that, when a woman writes about a family, it's women's fiction. And when Jonathan Franzen does it, it's art. But now there's a kind of backlash, and not that I think we should silence any voice, male or female or gay, straight, or anything, but I just thought it was profoundly interesting that suddenly these young white male writers are feeling they don't have an avenue to tell their stories. And I would say, yeah, you will just tell the story that's deep within you. So
I haven't seen that piece, but I want to stay on that for a minute. I haven't seen that piece, but my husband told me about it, and it's written by Francine Prose. And I will tell you that there's a direct line from Francine Prose to this book, because I went to this Writers Conference at one point in time, and Francine Prose was there, and she spoke about the predominance of, this was in the 1990s, I think it was one of the 1990s ones I went to. She spoke about the dominance of male voices in literature. And she said, trust me, she said, pull out your New York Times Sunday Review every week and count the number of male reviewed books, written reviewed books, and female written reviewed books.
Right.
And I started doing that, and it was shocking. It was like 9 men to 1 woman. So even if women were getting published, they weren't getting the kind of attention that makes them serious literature or bestsellers. And so that's what, that really put me on the alert for the underrepresentation and under-respect that women in the arts get. And so here I am now writing about it, and not in a themey way. I mean, obviously the book is meant to be a fun read and a story about Hollywood and relationships and mansions that overlook the beach in Carmel and all that, and writing and art and typewriters and all that kind of thing. It is about that,
Please tell us about the title of Typewriter Beach. I love this. This is such a great, because it's like I used to be a professional namer, and the one thing that we did that was always successful is when you take two things that are totally, you don't think they go together, and you put them together. Like Typewriter Beach is a great name. Where does it come from?
Well, first of all, I want to say Caroline has the galley, and I have the hardcover. And the hardcover has turned out, the galley's beautiful. The hardcover is even more beautiful because it just has a textured finish that's really gorgeous. So everybody look for it in the stores. The JPEG you see online doesn't do it justice, but the Harper Art Department really knocked it out of the park. The title, I will tell you, is. Did I just go again? No,
you're on loud and clear.
So the title comes from a friend of mine. His name is Laird Koenig, and I acknowledge this in the back. He's since passed away, but he was a screenwriter. He wrote for TV, and then he wrote novels. And he was already in his 80s when I met him, 25 years ago in Santa Barbara, California. And he is a wonderful writer. He won awards in France for his writing. He started out writing for Flipper as a.
Oh my God! I love that. Flipper is a dolphin, for those of you who don't know. Great TV show.
Anyway, I don't even know the show Flipper, because it was done by the time I was old enough, I think. But we were talking over coffee one time. We had a group of writers in Santa Barbara that would get together and just share the writing life. And he was talking about Malibu Beach at the time he was there writing. They called it, a group of little writers called it Typewriter Beach, because they would bring their typewriters down on the sand and they would work on there writing, and they would watch, Elizabeth Taylor and the other stars walk by. And I thought that was totally fascinating. And I said, "Oh, Laird, that's a great title and a great concept for a novel. You should write it." And he said, "Nope, I'm not going to write it. Do you want it?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'll take it."
Wow.
And so then I got the same response from some people when we started putting it out. I put it out there. My editor at first wanted to change the title, and she said exactly what you said. It's two things that don't go together. And I said, yes, exactly. I think it's interesting when you have two things that don't go together. And so we went through a lot of different titles, and then we settled back on Typewriter Beach, and I'm really, really glad for it. I love the title,
Great title.
in part because I love Laird and I like his title coming to the world.
That's great. That's great. So I want to tell everybody, I just want to remind you that in the chat, there is a link to bookshop.org. We love it at Almighty Blaze because they will tell you the nearest indie bookstore. You can go to your favorite, support the community, support writers, support readers. You can order Typewriter Beach there. You can order all of Meg's books. They're all completely wonderful. I want to thank everyone who was here. And Miriam, I see your question. If you email me, I'll tell you all the dirt. She wanted to know about my naming job. I just don't want to take time away from Meg. Meg, Can I give
a shout out also, because I know a lot of people listen to audiobooks.
Sure.
And there's a platform called Libro FM, Libro.fm, which also supports independent booksellers. And it's the same. You can do a subscription there just like you could at Audible. It's the same books, the same the whole thing, and it's a great source for audiobooks.
Libro FM.
Libro, yeah, Libro, like Libro, yeah, I don't know, like the sign, but with an O instead of A.
Got it. Okay, so thank you all, everybody. I will see you all next time. And Meg, you just hang on here. Let me just show this gorgeous cover. You should show the real gorgeous cover. Okay, so we'll have it like in stereo. This is a great interview. I'll see you all next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Caroline.